This is our heat pump water heater webinar. This is the first heat pump water heater specific webinar that we are doing. So we hope you learn a lot today. My name is Amanda Barker. I am the Clean Energy Program Manager at Green Energy Consumers Alliance, and I will let my colleague Loie Hayes introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Loie Hayes. I'm the Energy Efficiency Coordinator.
Great. All right, so moving along, just want to let everyone know that this webinar is being recorded, and by continuing with this webinar, you are consenting to participate in a recorded event. We will send out the recording along with the slides within the next couple of days so that you guys can have that as a resource to go back to afterwards. So in case you're not familiar with Green Energy Consumers Alliance, we are a consumer-focused environmental nonprofit. We were founded in 1982, and our mission is to speed a just transition to a zero carbon world and to help empower consumers and communities to do so as well. So we have offices in both Cambridge, Massachusetts and Providence, Rhode Island. And we achieve our mission through both consumer-facing educational content like this webinar. We also do webinars on electric vehicles, solar, basically any way that you can reduce your emissions. And then we also have an advocacy component where we have policy advocates in both states that spend a lot of time at the state houses pushing for climate policy to help make adopting heat pumps, for example, easier, to improve the incentives, things like that. Just to quickly go over some Zoom basics, you will be muted throughout the webinar, and we will answer questions at the end of the presentation. So if you do have a question pop up while Loie is presenting, you can use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen to ask your question, and then we'll be able to answer that at the end. Again, the webinar is being recorded, and we will be sending out a follow-up email with the recording as well as resources. And lastly, if you would like to use closed captions, you can click CC at the bottom of your screen to enable those. Agenda for today, we are going to start off by talking about heat pump water heater basics. What are they? How do they work? Then we'll get into costs and incentives for heat pump water heaters in both Rhode Island and Massachusetts. And then we will give you some advice on how to find installers. And lastly, we will leave about 10 minutes or so for Q&A at the end. So with that, I will pass it off to Loie to talk about heat pump water heater basics.
Yeah, thanks for joining us today again. And please give us feedback on this webinar because it is the first time that we're presenting this content. We hope to learn as well as you. We hope that you will learn as well. So most people don't think about how they're using energy in the home, but as the energy efficiency pioneer Amy Levins explained back in 1990, people do think about hot showers and cold beers. And this year, especially, we're thinking about affordability, and into the future, it's going to stay an incredibly important issue. How do we make the transition from fossil fuels to non-fossil fuels in an affordable way for everyone? So let's look quickly at our home energy pie chart and focus in on what it takes to provide those hot showers. You'll see in the average New England home, your water heating system is the second biggest single energy demand after space heating. Some hot water tanks use even more energy than an electric car would use driving for a year. Now, most chronic throat problem. It's pardon me if I start to cough. Most hot water storage tanks last about 10 years, meaning that property owners might replace their water heating 2 to 3 times more frequently than their furnaces or boilers. And this makes water heater conversions, replacing the fossil fuel systems with electric and the electric resistance equipment with highly efficient heat pump hot water heaters It's an incredibly important opportunity for reducing both our homes and our whole region's carbon footprint. Next slide, please. So how do heat pumps work? Um, and what makes them so efficient? A heat pump water heater is super efficient because it uses highly temperature sensitive refrigerant, just like your refrigerator or an air conditioner, to to absorb heat from the surrounding air. And it can absorb heat from very cold air because that refrigerant is very cold in its absorbing state. And then it uses a compressor to concentrate the heat within that refrigerant. And then it uses a pump to move that refrigerant through a coil in the hot water tank, dispersing the heat into the water that's going to come up through your faucets in your shower. Because it's not combusting oil, gas, or propane, there's no waste heat that goes up your chimney. So that's highly efficient. And it doesn't release any CO2 or harmful gases in your home. That's what makes it such a green choice as well. Heat pump water heaters are much less costly to operate than an electric resistance tank. An electric resistance tank might use 4,500 watts to heat a tank of water, but a comparably sized heat pump water heater needs only 700 watts, so like 15% of what an electric tank would need, roughly. Heat pump water heaters are always going to be the least polluting option compared to any other type of water heater. And the most common type of heat pump water heater is this hybrid option that is pictured here. It has a traditional electric resistance element, which can boost the water heating when you need a larger quantity of water or you need it more quickly than it's usually for your household. Next slide, please. So where would you put a heat pump water heater? They're basically the same size of other water tanks. So it's often in your basement. If you're replacing a tank, it would go in the same place. It could go elsewhere in the house as well, of course. But most often they're going to be installed in basements. Um, they generally will be hardwired into a 30 amp electric circuit. There are plug-in versions available. They're just not so common in our region because the water intake temperature is very cold, and yeah, they just haven't caught on here in a big way. Um, they also require either a floor drain or a condensate pump for the water vapor that condenses as the heat is pulled out of the air. Some moisture will condense. They do make some noise, but it's on par with a refrigerator or a dishwasher. Um, and let's move to the next slide. So there are alternatives to that integrated storage tank. So the integrated storage tank, the integrated storage tank has the heat pump right attached to the storage tank, but you can have the heat pump separate from the storage tank. It can be in the basement next to the water tank, essentially, or it could be outside as well. One second. There are also solar assisted split systems. These heat pump hot water heat systems that are separate are called split systems. So you can have a solar assisted heat pump that actually has three parts. It's got the storage tank, it's got the condenser, and then it's got a panel outside where the refrigerant is running through this panel and capturing heat from outside air as opposed to from your basement. These split systems are great for folks who have concerns about how a heat pump water heater might cool their basement too much, or say they've got a small space where the water heater is right next to a bedroom, if they're concerned about noise or something like that. And as I said, there are 120-volt options that you can certainly look into. Next slide. So here I just wanted to show a couple illustrations. On the left, you see a hybrid tank in a utility closet. You see there are louvered doors on that closet so that the heat pump is pulling air from the whole apartment to heat that water. This is certainly an option. You could also attach a vent to the airflow and pull air from elsewhere or expel air to elsewhere if you needed to do that for your house. On the right, you'll see the solar assisted panel. That's basically what it looks like. And it's attached to the side of the house. It could be on your roof, it could be in the yard, but generally attached to the side of the house. Next slide, please. So this is definitely proven technology, and there are many established brands that are selling these units. You'll see 190,000 units have been installed in the United States by the end of 2023. That's the most recent data we have on that nationwide installation rate. And many big manufacturers are making the hybrid tanks, Rheem and Bradford White, and all sorts of ones. And there are some that don't have the electric resistance element in it as well. So that's an option if you want even a lower energy usage. These, because they don't have the electric resistance option, will be lower energy usage. And now I wanted to let people know that if you live in the Boston area and if you're interested in being part of a pilot kind of a pilot project with a new company. It's called Reservoir. It's based in Charlestown, and they're offering discount pricing for folks who are willing to give feedback. And I can get you information about that if you want to follow up with me afterwards. This is specifically for people in the Boston area. Next slide, please. On to costs and incentives. Next slide. So breaking down the costs into first installation costs and then operating costs. Installation costs, of course, vary greatly depending on your location, what the prevailing wage is there, how you currently heat your hot water, and how complex the installation will be. Replacing an electric resistance tank would be the simplest conversion because you already have electricity coming to that location. If you're replacing gas, oil, or propane, you will need an electrician in addition to a plumber, so that's going to increase the cost somewhat. If you're replacing a tankless coil system or an indirect water heater, you'll need to run new water pipes to the tank as well as electricity. So that could be an adder for the cost. And if your electric panel is already full, you may need to upgrade your service, and that would be a significant increase. Mass Save estimates the cost at $3,200 for the average heat pump installation in Massachusetts. We think that's a little low. What we're seeing is estimates in the range of 5,000 and 6,000. So it's definitely something that you want to investigate. You want to get multiple quotes on and really think about all the things that you're going to need to wrap into the installation process. Let's move on to the operating costs. This slide is one that you can generate for yourself using the Mass Save website. The URL is there, and again, we'll be sharing out these slides so you have this information. But let me go over this briefly. again, operating costs vary greatly, and it depends on the price of electricity that you pay and what you're paying for your current water heating fuel. And of course, what those fuels will both be like 10 years from now as you're using this equipment. If you see on the left side, that tall column is the cost of the electric resistance. That is going to be, the most expensive option. And next to it is the heat pump water heater. And you see how, the enormous difference between those two shows you why we think anybody who has an electric resistance tank, you definitely should be planning to replace with a heat pump water heater. And you might want to do that on the early side rather than waiting the full 10 or 15 years of the lifespan of that electric resistance tank. You would be saving money by replacing it early. And this the particular assumptions that we built into this generating this graph are listed at the bottom of the page here. And with these assumptions, heat pump water heaters are also less expensive to operate than standard storage tanks heated with either gas or propane. And they're less expensive to operate than an oil-fired boiler with a tankless coil. Now, operating costs for a heat pump water heater in this example are slightly less than an oil boiler with an indirect tank and a propane fueled instantaneous tank, roughly comparable. And the natural gas instantaneous system is slightly less expensive to operate in this example. But do remember, gas prices have been rising faster than electric prices, according to the consumer price index now for the last year or so. And we expect that will continue given the transition to renewable fuels, et cetera, and the increasing urgency of fighting climate change and reducing fossil fuel use. Now, for homes that are heated by heat pumps, the new seasonal heat pump rate reduces your costs for all your electric uses, including if you had a heat pump water heater. In the example of this slide, a heat pump water heater in a home without the heat pump rate is expected to spend about $280 per year to heat their domestic hot water. But if they had the heat pump rate, they would spend only $225 for their water heating. So if you have the heat pump rate, then yes, the heat pump water heater is going to be the least expensive of all of these various options. And certainly if you have solar and thus your cost for electricity is lower, then the heat pump water heater is a no-brainer as well. Next slide, please. So incentives and loans, there are many. And Mass Save is got some decent incentives, $750 for an integrated tank, $1,500 for a split system, and there's a link there. There are two loan programs, the 0% interest heat loan, which is available for all income levels, or the 0 to 2% interest Energy Saver Home Loan Program, which is available for low and moderate income households, with that moderate income being defined as up to 135% of area median income. So those are good options. In Rhode Island, there are two options for Rhode Island Energy. They are incentivizing electric tank replacements and new construction, and that's a $625 rebate. And for Clean Heat Rhode Island, that is providing a rebate for conversions of gas, oil, and propane tank equipment, and that's $2,500 rebate. So that's a really great incentive if you're in Rhode Island and qualify for that. And the link there will tell you more about that. Next slide. So next steps, you want to start by using the either the mass save calculator or the efficiency main calculator also has, these are both equally usable, completely interactive. So you can put in whatever rates you want for your electricity, your gas, your oil, your propane, whatever it is you want to compare. You can put in the rates that are prevailing in your home area and generate your own chart showing, how these various things will compare. And then there are great sources of impartial advice in the Mass Save territory. There's the decarbonization consultations. In Rhode Island, there's the Clean Heat Rhode Island consultations. And elsewhere in Massachusetts, there's the Heat Smart Alliance. And they can also do calculations, consultations with you about heat pump water heaters. Next slide. And then researching the installers. In Massachusetts, MassSave actually offers two options. There is now a MassSave heat pump water heater marketplace. This offers fixed pricing for equipment purchase. So you can go on there and purchase your own heat pump water heater and then, contract separately with a plumber to say, I've got it sitting in my basement, what will it cost to install it? A plumber and electrician. And if you don't want to do that, there's also fixed pricing for electric tank replacement. So if you have an electric tank now through the marketplace, they can give you a price on replacing that. There's also the Mass Save Heat Pump Installer Network. This is, heat pump installers, but you can sort that list by different types of equipment, and you can sort it for heat pump water heater installations, and you'll get a whole list of people in your area who have gone through the Mass Save training and are familiar with, how to get the rebates and, how to, use qualifying equipment, etc. Now, in some Massachusetts municipal power communities, Abode Energy Management also has a list of participating contractors. So that's an option as well. And of course, you can, yeah. In Rhode Island, there's also a find in an installer option through Clean Heat Rhode Island. So that's a good option. And next, my last slide, when you start talking with heat pump installers, I would ask them even before they come out, how many heat pump water heaters have you installed in the last year? Which brands of heat pump water heaters are you certified to install? What is the UEF rating of the equipment you're recommending? That may be a conversation that you have after they actually get there and you're talking with them. Basically, you want to ask them, what are the options you can offer me, and what are the UEF ratings for those options? And the higher that UEF, the more efficient the equipment is. And there is a cutoff to qualify for the incentives, but you want to ask them, is the equipment you're recommending eligible for the state or municipal rebate? And that will make sure that you're getting equipment that is above whatever that UEF threshold is. So I will turn it back to Amanda, who will lead us for the Q&A session.
Great. Thank you so much, Loie. So yes, we are about to go to Q&A. So if you haven't already, now is a good time to put your questions in the Q&A box, and we will get to them shortly. Before we do that, I just want to remind everyone that we are a nonprofit organization and we are able to achieve our mission and do webinars like this one in large part thanks to donations. And so if you do feel so inclined to donate, you can go to greenenergyconsumers.org/give now. And here are both Loie and I's emails in case you want to follow up with either of us. With that, we will go to Q&A. So let me pull up the Q&A box.
I see a method. The first one is, can you provide the efficiencies used to generate the operating cost comparison? And I don't actually have access to that information. That's embedded in the mass save calculator, but I'm assuming that either there may be a way to drill down on the mass save website to learn those assumptions, or it may be something that we need to contact mass save to ask what were the assumptions built into um, uh, that calculator.
Great, thanks, Loie. It looks like someone is asking us to explain again the reduced cost for operating a heat pump water heater when they're on the heat pump rate. So would it be helpful for me to go back to that slide, Loie?
Sure. And I can explain it. There you go. So the slide that's on the graph that's on this slide is showing the cost in the second column, the cost for operating a heat pump water heater at 35 cents per kilowatt. That was, the rate in Eastern Massachusetts that I pulled up from a recent bill, et cetera. All things included, including the customer connection fee. So the heat pump rate is a 7 cent discount in Eastern Massachusetts. So anybody who has a heat pump that they're using for heating, it's not just a cooling heat pump, but a heating heat pump, will see that on your electric bill. The heat pump rate has been applied, and they'll be getting that 7 cents reduction. And so for the calculator, instead of using the 35 cents per kilowatt, I subtracted 7 cents to get what is it, 27, 28 cents, something like that, per kilowatt. And when I put that in, that total cost, operating cost for the heat pump water heater for the year dropped from roughly $280 to $225 per year. I hope that answers the question. Did you see anything else, Amanda, to make that more clear?
No, I think that answered it.
Great.
Looks like the next question is just asking how long the typical heat pump tank lasts.
They're similar to a regular heat pump tank. That storage tank is 10 to 15 years, something like that.
Great. And someone brought up that you mentioned how sometimes heat pump water heaters can cause the area around them to be cool. Would you be able to reiterate that or elaborate more on that?
Sure. So the if you could go back to the slide with the illustration of how the heat pump works next. There you go. Yeah. So you'll see the left area arrow is showing the air being sucked in. So this is, room air. Say your basement is 60 degrees, something like that. There's a little bit of waste heat from your heating equipment, but it's basically the temperature of the ground. So say 60 degrees. The room air is pulled in, and that air goes past the refrigerant coils. And the refrigerant coils are sucking the heat out of the air and grabbing it and concentrating it into the refrigerant. And another fan, or maybe the same fan, is pushing the air out. So there's a constant stream of air across that refrigerant coil. And the air that comes in is 60 degrees, and the air that goes out maybe like 57 degrees, something like that. There's a few degrees drop. Maybe it's more than that. I don't have the technicalities, but that's why the air coming out of it is cooler than otherwise. And so your whole space, your whole basement, will be cooler as a result of the heat pump water heater being installed. Now, I have heard from some people who've had both heat pump water heater installed, and then later, I think it was later, their boiler removed and replaced with a heat pump space heating system, and they didn't really notice the drop caused by the heat pump water heater installation. What they really noticed was the drop when the boiler was replaced, or the furnace was replaced by a heat pump, because that furnace or that boiler is basically a controlled explosion of hydrocarbons, and there's a lot of waste heat. That's some waste heat that's constantly being ejected from the heating equipment, and when you take that out, that will make your basement noticeably cooler. The heat pump will make it a little cooler, but not so much as removing your heating system.
Great, thanks, Lily. It looks like someone is asking their heating fuel for their hot water is currently propane, and they're asking if they would need to do away with their propane connection for their current heat pump. I'm sorry, for their current hot water heater.
Yes, yes. If you have a propane line going to your current water heater, that line would be disconnected from your propane tank and disconnected from your water heater, and it would be scrap, that that connection. I mean, you could still, if you say you had propane for your stove or something, you could still have a connection from your tank to your stove. You just wouldn't have one going to your water heater.
Great. And along those same lines, someone from Rhode Island is asking to get the $2,500 Clean Heat Rhode Island heat pump water heater rebate. Would they need to physically remove their oil furnace and tank, or can they still have that for regular home heating?
That I have not had experience answering, researching that question. I'm assuming what I've seen in Massachusetts is that if somebody has been using their fossil fuel space heating for making hot water also, if they install a heat pump water heater, they can still use their space heating. They don't need to remove their space heating. They can continue to use that. So I'm assuming that would be the same in Rhode Island, but I don't actually know from experience for certain.
Okay. Yeah, Tom, I'm happy to follow up with Clean Heat Rhode Island and confirm that for sure, but I would imagine that would be the case. Um, all
I
right.
see there are a couple questions about reliability, um, and contractors who say they don't install them because they get a lot of callbacks. And my sense is that because this is a relatively new technology, of course, what do they say? 190,000 have been installed in the United States. So it's a proven technology, but it's still only about 4%, I think, of the national market. Don't quote me on that figure, but it's still relatively young, technology, that a lot of plumbers just don't have experience with them, and a lot of homeowners don't have experience with them. They don't know what to expect. And so aligning both contractor knowledge and how to communicate that knowledge to the homeowners so that the homeowners' expectations are uh, fully informed, is still a work in progress, I would say. So, um, uh, yes, there will be contractors who don't want to install them. And that's why there are some great resources for finding contractors who are experienced with them. And each contractor will have their own preference on which brands, they have found most useful. And so it's important to get quotes from multiple contractors who are experienced with installing them because one might say, I only put in Ream. Another one might say, no, I only put in Bradford White. And, um, they'll have their reasons, but their reasons may not be appropriate for your house. And you have to be the one to discern which one seems to have the best information for your particular situation. So I don't think that there's a reliability problem per se. I think that these machines are, doing a good job. From what I'm hearing, people are very happy, plenty of hot water, etc. But you do have to have, um, you know, a, 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 an installer who's well informed and well experienced. Yeah, and a system that's well designed for your family's needs, and your family has to understand. For instance, if the system is sized for uh, a two-person household or a three-person household, and suddenly you have the cousins all arriving for Thanksgiving, you need to understand, okay, when the cousins arrive for Thanksgiving, we're going to have to switch to party mode. One of the installers uses the term party mode for activating all their electric resistance, so that, yeah, you can do 4 showers in a row and run the dishwasher 3 times in a day, etc.
Great. Yeah, that answers someone else's question. They're talking about how their natural gas on-demand water heater never runs out, and they can, have multiple people showering back to back, and basically, can a heat pump water heater keep up with that? And you're saying that if it has the party mode where it, kind of goes to that electric resistance feature, it can.
Yeah, yeah, and basically all the hybrid tanks have that option, where you can crank it up, if you will, or they have they understand that there are going to be times when you need to do you know 3 loads of laundry or whatever, and you can hit the button on your phone or on the machine itself and crank up the production.
Great. And could you just go over again what the difference is, like what an electric resistance tank is versus a heat pump water heater tank?
Sure. Yeah. Electric resistance is basically you're sending electricity through a rod in the tank. And that rod is it's getting very hot. And that's what creates the electricity. And as I noted, it could take 4,500 watts to heat up an entire tank if you're using electric resistance elements. Um, and a heat pump water heater is going to be um, using that refrigerant that's highly temperature sensitive to capture heat from the basement. It's a very kind of uh, not quite passive, but less energy intensive activity. It's just pulling it's just pulling air past the refrigerant coils and then pumping the refrigerant in a loop through the water. So much less energy is needed. Instead of 4,500, only 700 watts are needed to heat that whole tank of hot water with a heat pump water heater. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Um, let's see. It looks like someone is just asking for clarity on when the heat pump rate is in effect. So it's only in effect for the winter months. So I believe November through April. And then for the rest of the 6 months of the year, there you would just be on the standard rate. So it's only in effect in the winter when you would be using the heat pump to heat your home.
Yeah.
All right, we're getting a lot of questions. So, Loie, are there any that jump out to you as important to answer?
Yeah, somebody suggested that we run a group buy for heat pump water heaters. Um, if we had more dedicated funding to do that, we could potentially try that, but a group buy does take a lot of time to set up, and it's a little difficult. I mean, Mass Save, in effect, is trying to do this for the heat pump marketplace. But even for Mass Save, it's proving difficult because um, there are so many different types of conversions that need to happen. The tankless coil and the gas and the instantaneous, etc. That and so many different basements. Basement that's walkout versus a basement that's completely in the ground versus a garage versus a utility closet. Do they need a panel upgrade? Is the electric wiring, way in the opposite corner of the basement, the panel, etc. So it's very hard to standardize bidding for both heat pumps and heat pump water heaters, unfortunately. Um, so, yeah, at this point, yeah, we can't offer that.
Loy, would you be able to explain what is typically involved in adding a drain for the hybrid tank?
Oh, I wish I could. I don't think you want to do it.
Okay,
Um, if you don't have a drain, I think you're going to go with a condensate pump. Just a small little pump sits next to the heat pump water heater. The condensate is directed down into the pump, and the pump has an outflow that's either going to a sink or going to being plumbed into your waste pipe somewhere. So generally, I think you're not going to add a floor drain for heat pump water heater unless you're doing other work in your basement that is about moisture control. Say you wanted to add a French drain or something like that. Then you'd be, yeah, with the jackhammer and the gravel and the PVC pipes and things like that.
great, thanks. It looks like someone is asking about whether the Clean Heat Rhode Island rebate is income level dependent. I believe it is. I think you need to be making below 150% of the state median income to qualify for that rebate. And someone is asking about how to get more information about the reservoir pilot program. So we can just send out in our follow-up email a link to their program. And then if you have further questions, you're welcome to reach out to Loie for more information.
Yeah, I see a question is Burlington, Mass considered part of the pilot area for reservoir, and I don't think that it is, but I may be wrong on that. And again, that's something you could talk about with reservoir.
Right. Let's see. Loie, would you be able to comment on how installing a heat pump water heater might affect the home's value?
Hmm. No, I mean, I would think that an energy efficient buyer would be able to recognize, oh, you have a heat pump water heater. That means I'm going to be spending less on my water heating bill. Um, or they might say, oh, you have an environmentalist might say, oh, you have a heat pump water heater. That means my carbon footprint for this house is going to be less. But I'm not sure that there's any easy um, uh, real estate understanding of, oh, yes, this increases value of the house, because it's so um, uh, it's not commonly understood. The value of it is not commonly understood either within the industry, the real estate industry, or within the buyer market.
Right. Someone is trying to calculate return on investment of hard and soft costs. And I know you had said that installation is around $5,000 for replacing an electrical resistance unit. Would you be able, so that's the soft cost, would you be able to share the actual cost of the unit, the hard cost?
Oh yeah, through the massive heat pump marketplace, I believe um, uh, if somebody knows that figure, tell them, drop it into the Q&A for us. But I believe it's somewhere in the $800 range.
Great.
Yeah, it's really, the electrician and the plumber combined that really uh, adds a lot to the installation cost.
So we're getting a question from David asking, if you have a hybrid heat pump water heater, does this mean that you can expect to replace the entire unit every 10 to 15 years? Whereas if you have a system in which the heat pump is separate from the water heater, then the cost for replacement will be less because you are just replacing the water tank.
I'm not sure that the condenser has a particularly longer lifespan. Um, uh, but I don't know for certain, the two variables. Um, yeah, obviously you could replace them at a different interval then because they're separate units. If you're going back to the same company and saying, the storage tank is worn out, but the condenser hasn't, can you just give me a new storage tank? So that would delay the replacement costs at least, or defer some replacement costs.
Great. And can you comment on how well heat pump water heaters work in extreme cold? Does that impact them like regular heat pumps?
Um, well, there is, certainly the um, that fan pulling the air through um, has to pull more air through when it's pulling cold air through than when it's pulling warm air through. So there is, some extra energy there that's expended in really cold weather, but it doesn't change, the cost of pumping the refrigerant through the machine, I don't think. So it's not a big difference. And you want the machine to be um, properly sized so that it can work in extremely cold temperatures as well as any temperature. Um, and generally in basements, the the temperature is not the if the basement is fully submerged in the ground, that ground is always at 55 degrees, so extreme cold weather doesn't affect the equipment in the basement in that way so much. If the condenser's outside, obviously it's going to have to work harder to get heat out of 0 degree air than it does out of 50-degree air. But yeah.
Great. All right. Well, I think we made it through. There is someone asking a specific payback question that I think we could probably follow up with them via email, unless you're able to do math on the spot, Lily.
Yeah, I see the question. It's about the payback um based on the savings, the annual savings, operating savings, and that payback being extremely slow. It's the question is you're going to replace your equipment. You know, your equipment is coming to the end of its life. You're going to replace the equipment. So there's a sunk cost in whatever new thing you buy. And you know, do you want is there an additional cost in having to pay for a heat pump water heater? And that depends on, again, what quotes you're getting from people in your area and what incentives are available to you. Um, and then it's the incremental cost that you're spreading out over the lifetime of the equipment. And you know, there may not be a payback um, uh, because it's a necessity. You know, you have to have hot water, so you're going to do one piece of equipment or another, and um, you can't know for certain what the rates for your gas or your oil or your propane or your electricity will be. So you have to look at what's the projection of those rates. And as I said, we've seen the fossil fuel rates going up, or at least the gas rate going up, much faster than the electric rate going up. Consumer price index has that data for you. Also, the um energy information
Administration.
administration, yeah, would have projections of that as well. So, yeah, it's a good question. How do you make things pencil out? And it's a little complex because you're talking about a 10-year projection at least, or 15-year projection.
Great.
And what equipment and what professionals are in your area, and what are they charging? Yeah.
Gotcha. Um, well, that is really helpful. I think that's all the questions we got. We only have resources on Massachusetts and Rhode Island, but if you are in another state, I encourage you to go to your state Office of Energy Resources page or maybe your utilities page and see if there are incentives there. I know that Rewiring America also has a calculator that covers several states, not all states, but several states where you can put in your zip code and your information, and it'll plug out what incentives are available to you. So we can send that in the follow-up email as well, if that'd be helpful.
Yeah,
Um,
Rewiring America is a great source of information on rebates.
Great. All right. Well, if there are no further questions, I think we will give everyone 2 minutes back to their day. Thank you all so much for joining.
Thank you all. Look forward to hearing from you via email if you have questions or insights. Please share.
Great. Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Bye bye.